Traveling around the world, people often stop to rest and spend the night in hotels. When choosing a place to stay, travelers often focus only on price, service, and amenities, forgetting to ask about the history of the hotel itself. And sometimes it is worth thinking about it, because sometimes the history of the chosen hotel can be very dark, and having settled in it will want to get away from there as soon as possible. Story 1. The hotel where I work as an administrator is located in a picturesque suburb. It is a rather old stone building of 3 floors, but on the 3rd floor there is an attic where all sorts of old junk lies. There are not many rooms, all of them are made under the old style. All in all, a very nice place. That evening I came to work. We work in shifts. My shifter handed me all the cases and informed me that the guests had all moved out. It was quite strange. There had always been someone in the hotel before, and it had never been empty in my memory. In the evening, the cleaning lady went home. The guard called me and said that he was sick and could not go to work. It turned out that I would have to spend the night in the hotel alone. And not that it scared me at that moment, but I felt uncomfortable, nevertheless. I called all my friends, but no one strashno.com could get out of the house to be with me. At 11 o'clock in the evening, I walked the grounds, checked all the entrances and exits, closed the front and back entrances, and went to my staff room. It's a rather large room, a studio with its own shower and restroom. There's a security station in one corner, monitors from the security cameras that are located around the perimeter of the building, as well as on both floors in the hallways. There are no cameras in the rooms for obvious reasons. I took my book and sat on the sofa by the window to wait for guests. I should say that there are phones in the rooms to contact the receptionist, and on my desk was a multi-line phone with signed numbers. For about an hour I read, deep into the interesting plot of the book. The time had already passed midnight, and there were no guests. There was complete silence in the strashno.com hotel. Suddenly I heard a child crying. What is this nonsense? Where could a baby come from? Maybe I'm already glitching. I cautiously stepped out into the 1st floor hallway. The sound was clearly coming from upstairs. My legs felt soft as absorbent cotton, and I felt goosebumps running down the back of my neck. I thought it was the cat that had somehow gotten into the living room and was stuck somewhere. I went up to the 2nd floor. The sound was still coming from upstairs. The thought struck me that the sound was coming from the attic on the 3rd floor. There wasn't even a light in there, but we have to go anyway. Maybe the cat needs help. I kept thinking of an animal, but to be honest, it didn't sound like a meow, more like a cry. It was a quiet sobbing. I went to the back room to get a lantern and went upstairs. Gathering my strashno.com strength in a fist, I unlocked the door and entered the room. Crying, already now more like a rustling with a creaking sound, was coming from the far corner of the attic. I pointed the flashlight beam there, and I saw nothing. Ordering myself not to be afraid, I headed that way. I saw an old record player by the beam. There was a record spinning in it, and it was making those sounds, because the needle was not going around in a circle as it should have, but was getting into place, and then jumping off the record in different places. I was just indescribably scared, just wild. There's someone here. Someone had started this machine, hadn't they? I started to look around the attic with the flashlight. It looked like no one, but how? I had just unlocked the door to the 3rd floor myself. Throwing myself back up, I tripped and sprawled on the dirty floor. I jumped up, rushed to the door, slammed it shut, and pressed my back against it. What strashno.com is this? Oh my God, I whispered a prayer, asking for everything to be all right. I went down to my room, locked the door from the inside. What do I do? Call the police? The shift girl? My husband? Her mind was racing. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the ringing of the phone. I rushed to it. Finally, someone's calling. Running to the desk, I froze like a stumbling block. The phone was ringing, yes, but the call was from inside the hotel, from the 8th room, as signaled by the light burning opposite the number. Carefully, she picked up the phone. Silence. I hung up on the phone and rushed to the surveillance monitors. Okay, 2nd floor. The door to room 8 was ajar, though I definitely locked everything on my rounds. Windows closed, no drafts, air conditioning running. I really felt like I was going gray. I was terrified beyond belief. I sat like that, staring at the monitor for about an hour. Maybe an hour and a half, Nothing was happening. At what point the sound strashno.com coming from the attic stopped, I didn't notice. The phone didn't ring. I picked up the phone, deciding to call my husband after all. But there was no signal. I picked up my cell phone, there was no antenna either. With some indifference, I looked at the monitor of the second floor cameras and saw that the door of the 8th room had shut by itself. But the door to the 7th room was immediately ajar. I strained all my vision, trying to see at least a shadow of someone, but I saw nothing. But the wooden stairs from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor creaked. My teeth clattered. Someone was coming downstairs. I checked to make sure my door was closed, propped the handle on my chair, and hugged my knees to my knees, staring intently at the slit of light under the door. Nothing was happening. The adrenaline in my blood was going off the charts. A little more, and I would have thrown myself out the window. I tried to find some rational solution, strashno.com, but there was a ringing emptiness in my head. There was no one in the monitors, but the stairs creaked still. It was the way it used to be when particularly heavy and slow guests came down it. I looked at the door. The round knob on it began to turn slowly. I began to recite prayers in my voice. I shouted, "Go away," and I crossed myself, but I couldn't move. Everything stopped. I glanced at the monitor. All the doors on the 2nd floor were closed. A glance out the window, IT was getting light. After that night, I took a vacation, went to church, prayed, took communion and confession. I went back to work, but from then on I never stayed alone in the hotel. I had someone with me all the time. What happened then, what that entity was, I do not know. The only reminder of the experience is the gray hairs on my head. Story 2. We chose this hotel purely because of the price to location ratio. Surprisingly, for such a price we could stay for a week almost in the very center of Prague. According to satellite photos on the internet, we found the hotel building in one of the courtyards of the Jewish quarter, not far from the famous Jewish cemetery. A quiet and peaceful place, and at the same time a 15-minute walk to Old Town Square. The website for hotel reservations said we bought the last room for these dates. We could not find any other reviews for this hotel, even on the English language internet. Upon arrival, however, we circled the neighborhood for a long time until we found a small 3-story house squeezed between 2 buildings with an inconspicuous sign and a door that looked more like a doorway. But we expected this sort of thing from 2 stars, so we weren't too upset and walked in. There was a full woman sleeping on the reception desk who knew neither Russian nor English. We introduced ourselves and she didn't even look at our papers. Silently accepted payment by card and gave us the keys. Not electronic cards, but steel-shaped keys for locks with large chinks. We giggled some more at the gothicness of the furnishings. It turned out that our room was on the 3rd floor, and to get to the stairs, we had to walk for a long time through a semi-dark corridor with some pictures in heavy frames. I think there were pictures of old Prague, but my husband said he looked at them better. And the pictures were not views of the city, but pictures of some gruesome events, like executions or traumas. We were even more amazed by the stairwells instead of glass windows. They had colored stained glass windows with stylized sea monsters, squids, octopuses, and something else quite disgusting, which I don't know the name of. The stained glass windows gave little light, and they had obviously not been cleaned in a long time. Of course, we were dumbfounded by the place, but on the whole, we even liked the atmosphere. There were 3 rooms per floor, and they were located far away from each other. We did not meet a single person during this time, and the silence was sepulchral. The room was unexpectedly clean but shabby. The window looked out onto a courtyard with a blank brick wall opposite, overgrown with ivy. Below the window was a small abandoned garden. A bed, a small shower with a toilet, an antique cabinet carved with flowers, and a small TV were all we found in the room. We quickly freshened up, changed, and went for a walk. We returned relatively late. The door to the hotel was closed, so we had to knock. Then the door opened on its own, as if someone had opened it from inside, but we didn't see anyone. There was a table lamp burning at the reception, but no one was there either. We went to the room through that dark corridor. No lights were on, and here I had my first unpleasant feeling. Those photos were glowing in the dark, or rather the people in those photos were flickering faintly, especially where their eyes were. Only the faint glow of the light bulb by the stairs kept me from screaming and running out of the hotel. As soon as we reached the stairs, the light bulb began to flicker. and I began to imagine that the figures on the stained glass windows came to life. In short, my husband saw all this too, but for some reason he decided that this is such an entertainment for tourists, building up the atmosphere. Again, there was absolute silence, and it really seemed that there was not a single living person in the hotel. Deep in the night, we woke up to someone mooing behind the door. Well, it was not an animal, but obviously a person, but somehow wistful and tearing. My husband said that it was too much, but did not break through, but first called the reception, of course. No one answered, and then took a chair and opened the door sharply with it. It was pitch black, there were no lights on the floor at all. We heard the stomping of running feet, as if a 3-year-old child had run away. My husband wanted to go to the administrator, but I persuaded him not to go. We had no flashlight, and we had to cross a staircase and a horrible corridor. And I was 100% sure that there would be no one at the front desk. We locked up. I headed to the bathroom to rinse my face. As I walked back, my eyes fell on the keyhole, and then I screamed at the top of my voice. There was a white eye looking at me. I flew up on the bed and cowered in the corner. My husband was frightened too, and did not open the door, though it was quite possible to put it down to my nerves. He only put the key in the keyhole. And then it turned out that it wasn't my imagination. They started pulling the door from the other side and trying to shove the key out. From the corridor outside the door, there was some nasty grunting and the smell of burnt wool. There was mooing again. I became hysterical. My husband started to call the police, but they could hardly understand what he wanted. He only shouted the address of the hotel into the receiver. Then, as the apotheosis of the night, someone knocked on the window. On the 3rd floor. My husband pulled the curtains apart in a rage, but since there was a light on in the room, all we saw was our reflection, although I thought something white jumped up. Something scurried across the roof above us. We could hear the sound of footsteps on the tin flooring. My husband's phone rang. It was the police. They were there checking something out. Eventually, the police had to come up to us as we flatly refused to leave the room ourselves. We quickly packed up and left this hotel. There was still no one at the reception. We spent the rest of the night at the police station. I was steeped in coffee. The interpreter who had been invited clearly didn't believe us, but the police officers were somehow businesslike in recording our statements. One of the callers mentioned in passing that they had knocked on every room in the hotel but had found no occupants. Whether they were able to question any of the hotel management, we never realized. In the morning, they let us go and helped us book a hotel in the Malostran part of town at a discounted rate. We don't know what it was. My husband thinks the crooks were scaring us, wanting to steal from us, but I remember that eye in the keyhole. I won't forget that look. It certainly wasn't human.